Your goodness is killing you. It's not a weapon, it's a wound. Every time you forgive without consequence, every time you help without hesitation, every time you understand without judgment, you're bleeding power. Why do they speak over you? Why do they ignore your boundaries? Why do they take more than they give? It's not because you're weak, it's because you're predictably good. You show your virtue too early, you care too visibly. You try to be kind before being respected. And in a Machiavellian world, kindness without respect is the same as surrender. The world doesn't fear saints, it uses them. Look at yourself right now. How many times have you been the first to apologize? How many times have you helped someone who never reciprocated? How many times have you forgiven behavior that never changed? That's the trap. While you play by moral rules, they play by power rules. They test you, push you, drain you, because they know exactly what you'll do. Your goodness has become your prison. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He didn't write to corrupt the virtuous. He wrote to save them from themselves. A man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must come to ruin among so many who are not good. It doesn't mean becoming cruel. It means becoming strategically good. Because in rooms full of takers, the one who gives selectively is the one who survives. Not just survives, dominates. When you're automatically good, you're nothing but a resource to be harvested. But when your goodness becomes calculated, unpredictable, earned, that's when people stop taking and start respecting. They expect your kindness on demand, and that's how they control you. Can they make you help when it costs you? Can they make you forgive when it hurts you? Can they count on your sacrifice? Every time you say yes, they mark you exploitable. Every time you say no, they mark you valuable. The power isn't in being bad. It's in making your goodness a consequence, not a guarantee. Machiavelli wasn't a monster. He was a mirror. He saw what happens when good people refuse to understand power. The stakes are simple but profound. Strategic virtue survives, blind virtue dies. Every time you help without discretion, forgive without consequence, or sacrifice without return, you're not being noble. You're being naive, and the world punishes naivety with mechanical precision. The danger isn't in your goodness itself. It's in its predictability. When people know exactly how good you'll be, exactly when you'll bend, exactly what you'll tolerate, they don't respect your virtue. They exploit it. Look at history's great moral leaders. Gandhi wasn't just peaceful, he was strategic. Mother Teresa wasn't just compassionate, she was politically astute. Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't just loving, he was tactically brilliant. They all understood that virtue without power accomplishes nothing. Machiavelli wrote, "How we live is so different from how we ought to live that he who studies what ought to be done rather than what is done will learn the way to his downfall rather than to his preservation." He wasn't advocating evil. He was describing reality. The prince who believes goodness alone protects him will be destroyed by those who understand power better than he does. This is what's happening in your life right now. Your boss knows you'll work late without complaint. Your partner knows you'll forgive without consequences. Your friends know you'll give without expectation of return. They don't see this as moral strength. They see it as a resource to be harvested. And when a resource is abundant and free, it becomes worthless. If you cannot balance moral principle with strategic application, your goodness becomes nothing but a target painted on your back. The unrestrained giver will always attract takers. The unlimited forgiver will always attract offenders. The boundless helper will always attract users. It's not because people are evil. It's because resources flow toward the path of least resistance. The cost of naive goodness isn't just personal, it's systemic. When good people refuse to understand power, they surrender the world to those who do. When moral people reject strategic thinking, they guarantee immoral outcomes. This isn't cynicism, it's clarity. The cost of unguarded goodness isn't just your energy, it's your impact. Because goodness without teeth changes nothing. The martyr who dies for a cause but understands nothing of power leaves the world exactly as broken as they found it. But the strategist who applies virtue with precision, who knows when to give and when to withhold, they reshape reality itself. The stakes could not be higher. Every day you practice naive goodness. You not only harm yourself, you strengthen the very forces you wish to change. The choice is yours. Continue being uselessly, predictably good, or learn the dark arts of strategic virtue. Not to abandon your moral core, but to protect it. Not to become cruel, but to become effective. Machiavelli didn't just observe politics. He observed human nature stripped of pretense. What he saw in royal courts, you experience daily. In politics, he watched allies betray allies once they sensed weakness. In your life, you watch friends disappear once you stop being useful. The patterns are ancient, but your blindness to them is costing you everything. People don't exploit the dangerous. They exploit the predictably good. They don't test boundaries with those who might retaliate. They test them with those who will explain, understand, accommodate. They know your kindness will paralyze you before your self-protection activates. But once you become selectively virtuous, even quietly, everything changes. They hesitate before asking for that small favor. They reconsider before crossing that boundary again. They think twice before taking you for granted. Why? Because now, you might still help, but you might also refuse. The power isn't in cruelty, it's in unpredictability. The consistently good are transparent. The strategically good are translucent. One can be seen through completely. The other lets just enough light through to create intrigue. Who holds more power in any room? The person whose every thought is visible on their face, or the one who reveals themselves selectively, deliberately, purposefully? Goodness that's guaranteed becomes background noise. Goodness that must be earned becomes foreground music. They expect you to always give. That's how they measure their control over you. Can they make you help when it inconveniences you? Can they make you forgive when they haven't changed? Every time you meet these expectations, they mark you as conquered territory. Every time you don't, they redraw their maps with newfound respect for your borders. Your kindness should be rainfall, not a flooding river. Rainfall is selective. It nourishes what deserves to grow. A flood is indiscriminate. It drowns the worthy and unworthy alike. How many of your relationships have become muddy because you flooded them with unearned goodness? We assign worth based on scarcity, not abundance. On effort required, not effortlessness experienced. Consider how people treat free advice versus paid consulting. The same wisdom charged for is followed. Given freely, it's ignored. The wisest parents know this instinctively. They don't praise every scribble. They praise progress. They don't solve every problem. They let some consequences teach. And their children thrive not despite this strategic love, but because of it. Machiavelli understood that power isn't evil. Power is neutral. Like fire, it can warm a home or burn it down. The evil isn't in understanding power. It's in refusing to understand it while still expecting good outcomes. It's in disarming yourself morally while leaving others fully armed. The prince who refuses to study power doesn't remain virtuous. He becomes irrelevant. Look at the actual impact of your unlimited goodness. Are the people you've endlessly helped becoming more independent or more dependent? Are the boundaries you've repeatedly forgiven being more respected or more violated? The road to hell isn't just paved with good intentions. It's maintained by good people who refuse to be strategic about their virtue. The truly good aren't pure, they're effective. They don't just mean well, they do well. Your goodness has been weaponized against you. Every time you automatically help, automatically understand, automatically forgive, you're not practicing virtue. You're practicing submission. You're training people to see your boundaries as suggestions. Your time is unlimited, your energy as free for the taking. The most profound goodness isn't reflexive, it's reflective. It asks, will this help truly help or merely enable? Will this forgiveness heal or merely permit? It measures not just the immediate relief of giving, but the long-term consequences of what that giving creates. Machiavelli wasn't teaching princes to be cruel. He was teaching them to be consequential, to matter, to affect real outcomes in a real world governed by power dynamics, not moral wishes. Will your goodness be a pleasant but passing sentiment that changes nothing? Or will it be a strategic force that reshapes reality itself? Will you be harmlessly good or powerfully good? Because only one of these actually makes the world better. Step 1. Never show goodness automatically. The perpetually virtuous reveal everything immediately. Their compassion is on display before it's earned. Their forgiveness is guaranteed before it's requested. And the more predictable their goodness, the easier it becomes to calculate exactly how to exploit it. Watch how quickly people learn which guilt button activates your help. They aren't evil, they're efficient. They can serve their resources by accessing yours. But Machiavelli didn't teach constant virtue. He taught strategic virtue. He knew, if they can predict your goodness, they can weaponize your goodness. If they can anticipate your mercy, they can schedule their transgressions around it. But if they can't predict when your virtue will appear and when it will vanish, suddenly they treat it as precious, not presumed. So you give when it creates strength, not dependency. You help in ways that build capacity, not reliance. You keep your compassion wrapped not in coldness, but in judgment. Not to be cruel, but to be transformative. Because true goodness measures its impact, not just its intention. Step 2. Don't explain your moral choices. Nothing weakens virtue faster than justification. Every explanation is a negotiation. The moment you start defending why you didn't help, why you didn't give, why you withdrew your energy, you've already lost the power dynamic. If someone questions why you didn't volunteer again, and you explain that you're overwhelmed, you've confirmed their right to audit your bandwidth. If they ask why you didn't loan them money again, and you detail your financial situation, you've accepted their authority to evaluate your priorities. Machiavelli wouldn't explain. He wouldn't justify. He would simply state, "Not this time. That doesn't work for me." Period. No elaboration. No defensive qualifiers. Because he understood that the person who explains is implicitly seeking approval, and the person who seeks approval has surrendered power. Step 3. Make your goodness unpredictable. A virtue doesn't need to be consistent. It needs to be consequential. People don't value what they can schedule. They don't appreciate what they can plan around. Predictable goodness becomes environmental, like air. Necessary, but noticed only when it's absent. Look at your relationships. Who takes you for granted? Those to whom you've been consistently, predictably good. Who values your time? Those for whom your attention is scarce, earned, uncertain. This isn't manipulation, it's human nature. We assign value based on scarcity, not abundance. So you become strategically inconsistent. Sometimes you forgive immediately. Sometimes you require amends. Not based on mood, based on merit. Not to confuse, but to create an environment where your goodness must be earned rather than assumed. Step 4. Remain composed when others demand your goodness. The greatest form of moral authority is selective virtue in the face of entitlement. When someone expects your help, and you calmly decline. When they anticipate your forgiveness, and you quietly withdraw. Not with anger, not with punishment, but with serene, unruffled selectivity. Watch what happens when expectations of your automatic goodness hit the wall of your composed selectivity. They don't get angry at first, they get confused. They attempt to recalibrate. Then comes bargaining. Then comes testing. Then, finally, comes respect. Not because you've been cruel, but because you've demonstrated that your goodness has conditions. Machiavelli noted how the most respected leaders weren't those who raged when crossed, but those who became quietly, unervingly evaluative. They didn't shout, they observed. They didn't threaten, they considered. And this composed selectivity created more behavioral change than any emotional outburst could achieve. Step 5. Withdraw completely rather than partially. Half measures of boundary enforcement create more problems than they solve. Lukewarm consequences teach nothing. The strategically good aren't ambiguous, they're binary. When they give fully. When they withdraw completely. Not to punish, but to clarify. When you decide someone has violated your boundaries or taken your virtue for granted, you withdraw completely. You make your absence total. Not forever, but until the lesson is learned through experience, not explanation. Until they feel the full impact of life without your goodness, not just the inconvenience of it being reduced. This complete withdrawal isn't emotional punishment. It's strategic education. It teaches through experience what words could never convey. And sometimes, it's the only language that creates lasting change. You want to become strategically good? Start with daily habits that make people earn your virtue rather than expect it. Small practices that rewire how your goodness is perceived, not as an unlimited resource, but as a precious commodity. Habit 1. Never be the first to offer help. When someone hints at needing assistance, wait. When they describe a problem, pause. Everyone else rushes to prove their goodness. Everyone else competes to be the first to help. But not you. You stay still. You evaluate. You let their request exist without immediately filling it. Why? Because every person who helps first is always seen as the resource, not the authority. The servant, not the master. And resources get depleted, servants get commanded. Machiavelli would rather let someone believe he didn't notice their need than offer help before they directly asked. Because the pause is not indifference, it's assessment. It communicates one essential truth. My assistance is a choice, not a reflex. Notice how the most respected people you know rarely leap to assist. They don't rush to solve others' problems. They wait. They consider. Not because they're uncaring, but because they understand that what's automatically offered is never fully valued. Habit 2. Give slowly. Withdraw quickly. Forgive rarely. This sounds harsh to the untrained ear, but it rewires perception at the deepest level. Giving slowly, it shows that your generosity is thoughtful rather than reflexive. Withdrawing quickly, it establishes that your presence is a privilege, not a right. Forgiving rarely, it communicates that your trust has value, not default status. Most people operate in the opposite timing. They give quickly, withdraw slowly, forgive frequently. And this inverted rhythm trains everyone around them to devalue what comes too easily, to test what withdraws too gradually, to transgress what forgives too readily. The wise parent doesn't immediately replace the toy the child carelessly broke. The effective teacher doesn't immediately help when the student hasn't tried independently. Not because they lack compassion, but because they understand that timing shapes value. Habit 3. Be consistent in principles, inconsistent in application. Your values shouldn't change, but how and when you express them should vary with circumstance. The dog helps everyone the same way. The wolf helps selectively, strategically, specifically. The principles remain compassion, generosity, forgiveness. But their expression becomes unpredictable, contextual, earned rather than automatic. Some people deserve your full warmth. Others merit professional courtesy. Some have earned your trust. Others warrant careful evaluation. This isn't mood-based inconsistency. It's merit-based calibration. Not emotional volatility, but strategic variability. You've been conditioned to believe that goodness means treating everyone the same regardless of their behavior. But think about it. Is the doctor who prescribes the same treatment to every patient regardless of their condition being consistent or negligent? True goodness isn't uniformly applied. It's precisely calibrated. Habit 4. Never justify your moral boundaries. When you say no, let be no. When you withdraw, let be withdrawal. No explanations that invite debate. No justifications that open negotiation. No emotional reassurances that soften the impact. Clean, clear, unapologetic boundaries delivered without defensiveness. Most people can't resist the urge to explain their limits. I can't help you because I'm overwhelmed. I'm not available because I need self-care. And each explanation becomes a point of negotiation. The justification doesn't reinforce the boundary. It weakens it by making it seem open for discussion. Watch how the most respected people handle boundaries. They don't defend, explain, or apologize for their limits. They simply state them, maintain them, and move on. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that. Period. Not because they're callous, but because they understand that boundaries justified become boundaries negotiated. Habit 5. Maintain neutrality when tested. The strategically good don't emotionally react when their boundaries are pushed. They don't get defensive when their virtue is questioned. They don't become angry when their limits are tested. They remain calm, cool, and evaluative, not punitive, reactive, or agitated. Watch what happens when you reject someone's request without emotional reassurance. When you maintain your boundary without defensive explanation. They don't get a predictable emotional reaction they can engage with or manipulate. Instead, they encounter your judgment without your emotion, your assessment without your agitation. When someone tests your boundary and you respond not with heightened emotion but with slightly raised eyebrow. When they question your virtue and you reply not with defensive justification but with silent observation, your neutrality becomes more impactful than any reaction could be, because it signals not emotional vulnerability but sovereign evaluation. The strategically good person isn't emotionless. They're emotionally sovereign. They feel deeply, but they don't display automatically. Not to be cold, but to be consequential. Not to be unfeeling, but to be unflinchingly in command of which feelings get expressed, when, how, and to whom. There's a fine line between strategic goodness and callousness, between virtue that commands respect and virtue that hardens into cruelty. This balance isn't just delicate, it's essential. Because goodness without power accomplishes nothing, but power without goodness corrupts everything. Machiavelli's genius wasn't in dismissing goodness for power. It was in understanding the calibration between both. He saw how purely good rulers were destroyed, how purely powerful rulers were assassinated, and how those who mastered the balance endured. So that when you choose to be good, it's seen as strength, not weakness. The purely good leader is overthrown. The purely powerful leader is murdered in his sleep. But the strategically virtuous leader transforms his kingdom, because he's respected enough to be obeyed and moral enough to be followed. He generates not just compliance, but commitment. Goodness without boundaries breeds exploitation. If people only see your virtue, they will take without giving, demand without earning, expect without appreciating. They'll mistake your kindness for weakness, your forgiveness for permission, your help for obligation. This isn't because they're evil. It's because they're efficient. They conserve their resources by accessing yours. Look at the perpetually kind people in your life. Are they thriving? Are they respected? Or are they exhausted, exploited, and resentful beneath their perpetual smile? This is unsustainable goodness. It helps momentarily, but destroys ultimately. But power without goodness breeds resistance. If people only fear you, they will comply publicly but sabotage privately, obey outwardly but resent inwardly. They don't change their hearts, they just hide their feelings. And whatever you build through pure power will collapse the moment that power wavers. The solution is mastering their integration. This creates what Machiavelli called virtue, not mere morality, but effective force guided by moral intelligence. Not mere power, but purposeful strength directed toward worthy ends. This balance manifests as productive tension that keeps people engaged, not the tension of abuse, where people fear random cruelty, but the tension of earned consequence, where people move carefully out of respect for established boundaries. How do you build that tension? Be consistent in control, inconsistent in expression. Your self-mastery never wavers. Your boundary enforcement never falters. But how you express warmth, offer help, show understanding, this varies strategically. Not based on mood, but on merit. Not emotionally reactive, but strategically responsive. Give precise value, then create space. You don't speak often, but when you do, it matters. You don't help constantly, but when you do, it transforms. Then you step back. You allow your impact to exist without diluting it through over-explanation or diminishing it through over-availability. Make people feel your absence without threatening to leave. When someone has taken your goodness for granted, you don't create drama. You don't make emotional ultimatums. You simply withdraw your energy. No explanation, no emotional processing, just a quiet removal of what they didn't value until they feel its absence. Let praise exist without confirmation. When people acknowledge your value, you don't deflect with false humility. You don't diminish with self-deprecation. You receive it as statement of fact rather than surprising revelation. Why? Because accepting praise without emotional dependence tells people something important. You already know your worth. This is how you balance power and goodness. You let people respect your boundaries, but appreciate your selective virtue. You create consequences for disrespect, but rewards for merit. Not to manipulate, but to allocate your finite moral resources where they create maximum positive impact. That tension, that balance, that's how Machiavelli would have ruled today. Not through cruelty masked as pragmatism, but through effectiveness guided by moral intelligence. Not by abandoning goodness, but by making it consequential rather than automatic. Because in a world governed by power, virtue without strategy doesn't triumph, it perishes. Let's move to more powerful tactics. These aren't just daily habits. They're deeper strategies that reshape how people see your goodness completely. Strategy 1. Don't give people the goodness they expect. Most people show all their goodness right away. They help too quickly. They forgive too easily. They give too freely. You do something different. You pause longer than normal. You think before helping. You give less automatically. You create a contrast that makes people notice. When everyone rushes to help, you wait. When everyone offers solutions, you ask questions. This unexpected response makes people slow down around you. They adjust how they talk to you. They think more carefully about what they ask for. Not because you're mean, but because your different response changes the whole exchange. Most people can predict exactly how nice people will act. This makes their goodness easy to use, but hard to value. When your goodness becomes less predictable, it becomes more respected. Strategy 2. Let them earn your goodness, then value what they earn. People will try to label you when you don't give automatically. He's selfish. She's cold. They're not a team player. Let them. Don't rush to defend yourself. Because once they start questioning your goodness, something interesting happens. They start working for it. The moment they wonder if your help is guaranteed, they begin appreciating it when it comes. Watch what happens when you don't immediately react to their need. When you don't instantly solve their problem. They don't just want your help more, they value it differently. What was expected becomes special. What was demanded becomes appreciated. Strategy 3. Leave goodness incomplete. Most people crave full closure. They want complete forgiveness. Total help. A perfect happy ending. You forgive mostly, not completely. You help specifically, not generally. You leave things slightly unfinished. Not to be cruel, but to keep engagement alive. When you fully resolve everything, people close the mental file and move on. When you leave something slightly open, some aspect of the help unmade, some part of forgiveness still in progress, they keep thinking about it. They stay engaged. They remain aware of the exchange. This isn't manipulation, it's human psychology. We think more about what's unfinished than what's complete. We value what's still in process more than what's fully resolved. The movie with the ambiguous ending stays in your mind longer than the one where everything is neatly wrapped up. Strategy 4. Protect your moral resources like valuable treasure. When people ask about your goodness, why you didn't help, why you seem different, don't give lengthy explanations. Don't share your complete thought process. Don't reveal all your moral reasoning. They ask why you won't help. You say, I'm being selective with my energy. They ask if you're being cold. You say, I'm being intentional. They ask what changed. You say, my approach to helping. Give them hints, not complete explanations. Principles, not justifications. Why? Because the moment someone fully understands your moral thinking, they can work around it. They can find the loopholes in your boundaries. They can craft appeals designed specifically to bypass your defenses. But when your inner moral world stays partly private, they stop trying to figure you out and start trying to earn your respect. They stop looking for weaknesses in your boundaries and start meeting your standards. Machiavelli's greatest insight wasn't teaching rulers to be feared. It was teaching them to be remembered as capable of anything, but choosing their actions deliberately. The power isn't in what you do, it's in what they believe you might do, but haven't yet. That possible response is what they can't forget. Most people are completely predictable in their goodness. When tested, they'll forgive. When asked, they'll help. This predictability makes them forgettable. But when your goodness becomes a choice rather than a guarantee, when helping is possible but not certain, when forgiveness is available but not automatic, you become unforgettable. Not because you're cruel, but because you're selective. Not because you're cold, but because you're deliberate. You haven't abandoned goodness. You've elevated it from a habit to a choice, from a reflex to a decision, from a weakness to be exploited to a strength to be respected. You've made it to the final phase of strategic goodness, where kindness is no longer a weakness to exploit, but a strength to respect. Where virtue isn't something you blindly practice, but something you purposefully direct. Where your goodness serves both you and the worthy with perfect balance. Machiavelli's final wisdom wasn't teaching cruelty. It wasn't promoting fear. It was understanding effectiveness. Because true power isn't when people take advantage of your goodness. It's when they respect your goodness enough to earn it. Think about the truly effective people you've known. The parent who loves deeply but doesn't tolerate disrespect. The teacher who cares completely but holds firm standards. The friend who supports you fully but walks away when taken for granted. They didn't abandon goodness, they mastered it. They didn't become cruel, they became consequential. The strategically good person cannot be manipulated. The automatic helper can be used endlessly. The reflexive forgiver can be hurt repeatedly. The guaranteed supporter can be taken for granted constantly. But the person who helps selectively, who forgives purposefully, who supports thoughtfully, they become not just good, but powerful in their goodness. Once people understand your patterns, they start working around them. They learn exactly what story will trigger your sympathy.